Hi again, Mark here from TalkingBass.net. This week I've got a short little video for you on the reasons why you might want to learn to read music. And yes, it does tie into the course that I recently released, the Simple Steps to Sight Reading, but this is more than just a sales pitch. Many people don't actually realise what a lot of the benefits are from reading music, and those benefits can actually turn out to be life-changing. So, sight reading is obviously the ability to read music at sight on first viewing without a need for a run-through, and that basically just means that you can read music well. Now, the first and probably most obvious benefit to this is the fact that you gain the ability to learn pieces of music by reading them rather than by picking them up by ear or by using tab and recordings. Remember, you're gaining that ability. You can still learn stuff by ear and by using tab, but you also have the extra option of learning from sheet music. So just think of the millions of pieces of music written and published. All of that music suddenly becomes accessible to you by learning to read. But that's almost too obvious a benefit. There are so many other direct and indirect benefits to be had. I'll get onto the more indirect, life-changing aspects in a second, but first it's worth looking at how reading can affect your overall level of bass playing. When you learn to read music, you generally have to divide the musical study. You learn how to read melody and you learn how to read rhythm. Now you have to put the two together, but it's important to see that split between the two. Now probably the biggest and most immediate improvement that you'll see from reading melody is in your knowledge of the bass fingerboard. When you read music, you don't have time to be working out where all the notes are. You just have to know them all. And you have to know them so well that they become automatic and almost instinctive. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have that knowledge before you start learning to read. It just develops as a consequence of reading. Because you develop the association between the notes on the page and the notes on the fretboard, and because you practice playing those notes over and over, you simply find yourself knowing every note on the bass neck without any hesitation. After learning to read music and after sight reading for a while, I found that my knowledge of the notes on the neck became pretty much perfect. I'd not worked on learning the notes with some clever exercises. It just happened as a consequence of reading. Now, I can't imagine not knowing that, that's a G, that's an F sharp, that's an E flat, that's a D flat. They just are. It's complete muscle memory. So that's a big benefit just by itself. I see lots of people looking for systems for learning the notes on the neck as if there's some quick fix exercises, but I really don't see how there could be a more thorough and perfect way than by learning to read. Just as learning to read a language like English and then reading lots of books is the perfect way to gain a better understanding of how we speak and the language in general. Now, I mentioned that we split reading up into rhythm and melody. Well, learning to read rhythms is one of the best ways to improve all the rhythmic aspects of your playing. When you read rhythms, you learn how to subdivide beats and bars, and you get to visually see how these rhythms work. Rhythm is a very mathematical aspect of music, and because of this, it's a very logical and ordered system. When we break a beat up into 4 pieces to create 16th notes, we only have a finite number of ways we can order them. When we practice reading, we have to consider every combination and practice them so that we can read them at sight. There's no time to be wondering about how the rhythm should sound. We just have to know all these different rhythms at sight. Now, on the face of it, if you're a non-reader, you might be thinking to yourself, well, we can't be practicing every rhythm there is. There's too many. Well, we can and we do, and absolutely have to practice every rhythm that we're ever going to read. Like I said, it's a simple system of rhythmic cells and permutations. There are only so many combinations of rhythms in common use. And yes, there are, an infinite number of rhythms if you decide to start getting into different rhythmic ratio values and things like that you might find in, modern contemporary classical music. But to us regular old bass players, the same old whole, half, quarter, eighth and 16th note rhythms are going to be used again and again and again. Now, there are several big upsides to practicing rhythm in this way. One is that you develop a better rhythmic diversity. Because you have to play so many different rhythms, you automatically expand your musical vocabulary, just as you improve your verbal vocabulary by using, reading and saying new and different words. You get to see and hear how these rhythms work, and you even get to use them in context because you're generally playing them in written bass lines and melodies. You also get to develop your rhythmic independence a lot. As you read music, you have to keep a constant track of the beats and you see all the rhythms with a reference to that beat. So as you're playing, you need to either tap the foot or at least count in your mind, and as you do that, you still have to play, and that develops your independence. You need to be able to understand where the beat is in relation to every rhythmic cell and do two things at once by counting and playing. Now, this also improves your rhythmic accuracy because you have a more developed sense of the subdivisions within the beat. With rhythmic accuracy, you develop your overall timing and in turn, your groove. So you can see that reading music is more than just a glorified version of reading tab. To learn to read music or sight read properly, you have to understand and practice many different aspects of playing. Now, as well as the basic benefits to your bass playing, there's the more indirect benefits. The first and most obvious of these is the professional side of playing. If you can sight read to a fairly decent level, you'll never be short of gig offers. If you can sight read, you open up a whole world of employment options. You can take reading studio work, theatre work, cruise ship work, dep gigs in bands with a pad. The list goes on and on and on. Time is money, and a lot of gigs demand that rehearsal time's kept to a minimum. There's often no time to be waiting for a musician to learn music by memory. Most of the gigs I've been playing over the past 10 years or so have been sight reading gigs where I turn up, I'm handed a pad of music, and then it's just a case of reading it for the first time on stage in front of a paying audience. Now, this isn't a rare situation. You know, most professional musicians do this on a regular basis. You get paid for that skill. Now, for me, the life-changing part of sight reading is as a direct consequence of all those gigs that I mentioned. If I never learned to sight read, my life today would be very, very different. Over the years, I've played with many wonderful people and so many amazing musicians and entertainers that I just would never have met otherwise. That's all through reading music. I've also travelled all over the world and visited places I would never have dreamed I could visit. Cruise ship gigs are a perfect example of that type of opportunity. Every one of the many cruise ship gigs that I've done have involved a pretty high level of sight reading. If you can work on your reading for a year or two, there's no reason why you can't take some of those cruise gigs and experience a totally amazing and addictive lifestyle. And finally, when I say that reading can be a life-changing skill, I really mean it. If I hadn't have learned to read music, I would never have been offered the gig where I met my beautiful partner and we wouldn't have had our two precious little girls. That skill that is so overlooked in bass players of all ages and levels is the one single area of study that is sure to transform your playing and quite possibly your life forever. There are no downsides to learning to read music, none, but there are limitless numbers of upsides. So now that should have given you some incentive for learning to read. If you feel like taking that jump into reading music, just go on over to TalkingBass.net where you'll find my Simple Steps to Sight Reading course. It's been over 10 years in planning and it uses both video lessons and various course workbooks to coach you along in a progressive, systemised manner, right from the very basics of reading music. Just follow the link in the info below to see some more details. Okay, I'll see you later.